What's up, guys? We are here again for another DVD, another instructional. It's going to be front headlocks and turtle escapes this time. Before we start, Sunny has a few things she wants to go over with you guys.
Well, hello guys. This is my DVD number 16, and I just realized that in the beginning was really fun, and now I just don't like to be here anymore. So maybe this is going to be the last one. I'm just kidding. Anyways, outfit of the day. This is brand new. There's some rubber here so you can go crazy on the leg locks. And well, I had some cold brew pumpkin coffee from Starbucks, and I'm ready to go.
And for some reason, you just unpacked your clothes and they smell like food, right?
They do, and I never wore this before. It smells like food.
She hates smelling like food, and whenever she does, she has to take a shower, which usually results in her showering 10 to 15 times a day. So we're going to see how this is going to go. This is like a 4 or 5 day operation here, and she'll be smelling like food the entire time. So it should be great. All right, now that that's out of the way, that's more or less the most important part of the instructional, by the way. Now that that's out of the way, we're going to be looking at turtle and front headlock escapes. These are two areas that are very under-taught in the sport because you don't really see them too often in our sport and competition. Besides when people are wrestling and when people are competing under ADCC rules because of the turtle rule. When you get taken down, you get past an ADCC and you turn to turtle position, you don't give up any points. So you see this a lot in MMA as guys go to try to stand up, they get taken down, they turn to turtle, try to stand up, or guys shoot a lot, they end up in a front headlock. But normally what you see when people are teaching turtle escapes is you see either a jiu-jitsu guy teaching turtle escapes where they roll into some kind of guard position, or if they're teaching turtle and front headlock escapes, if a wrestler teaching turtle and front headlock escapes, it's just wrestling moves to either stand up and get away from turtle, or to shoot in the legs or stand up and get away from wrestling in wrestling. But they're very different. We're going to talk about the differences between wrestling and jiu-jitsu shortly. But we're going to really dive into escaping front headlock when you're dealing with submissions, escaping turtle position by both rolling to guard and standing up and getting away from our partner. So two positions that are very under-taught by jiu-jitsu guys and are mostly taught by jiu-jitsu guys preparing for competition and bringing in pure wrestlers to teach them. And I don't think that's the best approach, but nonetheless, that's what you see most of the time. So we're going to dive into turtle or front headlock first and then turtle second. All right, now let's talk about, kind of segueing from the introduction clip, let's talk about the differences between front headlock and turtle when you're talking about wrestling versus jiu-jitsu. Okay, first of all, the scoring criteria is completely different. So in wrestling, something that scores may not score in jiu-jitsu and vice versa. In wrestling, you're trying to expose your partner's back to the floor, and in jiu-jitsu, you're trying to expose your partner's back to yourself. So for example, if someone goes behind me and gets a turtle position, me bellying out and going down to my stomach would not be a good thing for me to do because my partner could just take my back and strangle me. Whereas in wrestling, that's not what the goal is. The main difference between jiu-jitsu and wrestling when you're talking about front headlock and turtle attacks is a threat of submissions. Okay, if I have sitting down in a front headlock, for example, okay. If at no point she has hands on my hands, I can always come through and I can start feeding guillotines into place. I can start coming through and I can start feeding strangles into place, Gatames into place, various kinds of strangles from here. So my partner's first thing from a turtle or from a front headlock position is always to address my hand position. And if she doesn't, she's going to get strangled most of the time. Okay? Whereas in wrestling, your partner doesn't have to have a primary defensive hand because there's no threat of actually getting strangled and the match being ended from here. Okay, so you'll see things in jiu-jitsu that you don't normally see in wrestling, where from here, instead of sprawling, being in a situation like so, where my partner can't access my legs, I actually come in some cases, and I bait my leg and I give my partner my leg like so. so that now from here, we can go through, we can bait the leg so that her defensive hands come off of my hand. And as she goes to grab my leg, she exposes the neck, and now I can go in and sit the guillotines. Where in wrestling, you almost never see a situation where your partner baits the leg, where now she can start going into her attacks. But in jiu-jitsu, I don't always have to keep my legs back and away from my partner because of the fact that if she does, right now she has defensive hands in place. If I bring my leg towards my partner and she goes to lock on, now from here, we can start going in and we can start passing and feeding hands into place and going in for strangles and whatnot. Okay, so there's dangers of submissions when you're working in jiu-jitsu. One of the main differences that we look at from turtle position is that my partner from here, when you're talking about a jiu-jitsu context, is mostly looking to roll into a bottom guard position. Okay, so she'll roll over the near shoulder, for example, and she'll put me back into a guard. Okay, in wrestling, obviously, you can't do this because you can't expose your partner's back to the floor, or you can't expose your back to the floor in wrestling because you get pinned, you give up points. Okay, so in jiu-jitsu, she's obviously looking first to defend the submission. If I can just bring my hands across and lock a submission, I'm going to submit my partner. So again, she has to have defensive hands in place, and she has the ability to start shoulder rolling either over the near shoulder or the far shoulder and putting me back into some kind of guard position, which doesn't exist in wrestling. In a wrestling type scenario, my partner is looking to either one, belly out, which doesn't make any sense for us because now I just step over and I can start strangling my partner. Or more applicably, looking to separate hands, stand up, and looking to get away from me, which makes sense. Okay? The issue is that some things that are applicable in wrestling defensively don't work for jiu-jitsu, and some things that work in jiu-jitsu aren't applicable for wrestling. So the goal for the job that we have is to figure out what things we can use effectively from classical jiu-jitsu, and what things that we can take from wrestling and use them and modify them if we have to use in jiu-jitsu to get up and get away or to reverse our partner. Okay, so some major differences between wrestling and jiu-jitsu from both front headlock and from turtle position. Number one, obviously, the threat of submission. You can't just have your hands out on the floor or be reaching for your partner's legs if your neck's getting attacked and you're getting strangled. You can't leave your arms out for your arms to get attacked. You can't let your partner lock kimuras, things like that. So the threat of submission is obviously the biggest one. Number two is there's a drastic difference in how points are scored and matches are finished in wrestling versus jiu-jitsu. Some things that work in wrestling won't work in jiu-jitsu, and some things that work in jiu-jitsu obviously won't work in wrestling. So our job is to take a classical jiu-jitsu approach combined with a classical wrestling approach and modify moves that can work from wrestling and use them and integrate them into our jiu-jitsu to become an effective submission grappler. Okay, you always hear jiu-jitsu guys, old school jiu-jitsu guys preaching just jiu-jitsu. Just jiu-jitsu isn't all there is. Okay, and you hear wrestlers saying that, jiu-jitsu guys are pussies or whatever the case is. That would never work. You have to understand they're two different sports, and you can take elements from each sport and be very effective. You can be very effective combining the two sports together, and that's what we're looking to do. So we're going to be looking at classical jiu-jitsu combined with your typical wrestling approach. We're going to be looking at both standing and rolling escapes to put our partner back in guard, or to get up and reshoot in a partner. So it's going to be a good combination of the two. All right, let's look at a quick overview of what we're going to look at in this instructional. First, we're going to start in front headlock, and then we're going to go into turtle escapes. All right. When we're in front headlock, the first thing we're going to look at is obviously defending submissions. How to place our hands so our partner doesn't just immediately strangle us the second we get into a front headlock. And then we're going to go into some early defensive strangle escapes. I'm not going to go too far in depth because I'm doing a full strangle escaping instructional coming up. I can spend hours on just escaping strangles, just guillotines themselves. So we're just going to do very early, very conservative escapes with front headlock strangles. After that, we're going to look at how to defend our partner going behind and taking our back. Okay, we end up in a front headlock. We don't get strangled first, then our partner uses the threat of the strangle to threaten to go behind. I want my partner to go behind and take my back right away. So defending strangles first, defending go behind second. Once we can establish ourselves not getting submitted and not immediately getting our partner, or having our partner using a go behind and getting behind us, then we're going to start to go into our actual escapes. All right, we're going to start on our knees, and we're going to start with sitting into half guard. All right, because that's one of the things that you don't see in wrestling, because obviously you can't play guard. So sitting into half guard, pulling ashigarami, and using a classical jiu-jitsu approach to perhaps deal with someone who's a very good wrestler. And it's going to be hard to use traditional wrestling escapes against. So sitting into half guard, sitting into ashigarami, and just in general sitting into a guard. Okay. Then we're going to start with using escapes on our knees, depending on what kind of hand position our partner has with the front headlock. And then we're going to start to go into situations where we build to our feet and use 4-point escapes and building all the way to our feet to start escaping our partner's front headlock. Okay, so we're going to start first with immediately just not getting strangled and not getting our back taken by having our partner go behind. Then using sitting to guard methods, where we can go into escapes via sitting down, pulling half guard, pulling ashigarami, things like that. Then we're going to go into kneeling escapes, and then we're going to go into standing and 4-point escapes. Okay. Once we go into turtle position, I'm going to break that down into various sections when we get there. We're going to talk about that later, but just understand, because there are so many different upper body combinations that your partner can use, and so many lower body combinations your partner can use, that I'm just going to break it down to like near side shoulder roll, far side shoulder roll, 4-point get-ups, standing escapes, inside leg stand-ups, outside leg stand-ups, and we're going to break it into sections like that. We'll talk about that later. All right, but the first thing we're going to look at is defending from a front head, escaping from a front head, and then going to turtle defenses and escapes, and then we're going to do it just like that. So front head first, then turtle second. All right, so before we start, let's look at what hand positions my partner can have when they're operating from a front headlock, because there's many different combinations that they can use. Okay, my partner is down in a front headlock, like so. We can use situations where we have a front head and arm, where we have control of our partner's head and our partner's arm, and we have locked hands. Okay, now there are various combinations we can use from here. We can have my hands relatively centered along my partner's center line, like so. We can be in situations where I shoot a hand across, where I have a deep arm like so, and now we can start going in and locking up our hands, locking up Gatames, things like that. We can shoot our hands in the opposite direction, where we come through here. We switch sides. We have a front head. We can shoot our hands through in the opposite direction, where now from here, we can start going in and locking up Gatames like so, and breaking our partner down to a hip. Right? I have control of my partner's head and my partner's arm the whole time. I'm just moving my hand position. So we have locked hands in the front head like so, where my hands are relatively centered, and I'm looking to control my partner from here. I can shoot my hands through in either direction. I can go through towards my partner's armpit, or I can go through towards my partner's head. And now from here, we can start changing angles, going in, breaking our partner down to a hip, locking up our hands, locking darces, things like that. Okay, so we have a front headlock, control of our partner's head and arm with locked hands. Okay, we have various configurations we can lock in like so. My partner can have a front headlock with unlocked hands. My partner has control over my chin with a chin strap and a grip on my tricep, like so. Okay, where now from here, this gives us readily available guillotines. We can start moving our partner around. We can start switching into arm drags. We can do all kinds of things from here. So we have front headlock locked hands, front headlock unlocked hands. We have a front head where we have a chin strap and control of our partner's an underhook on our partner. So now if she tries to use this arm to reach for my leg, she runs into an underhook. When she goes to put her primary defensive hand in, other one, it's difficult, okay, because now there's underhook. Now when she has to put her primary hand in from here, it's easy. When I have an underhook, it's a lot more difficult now, and strangles become easier. So it's a problem we have to deal with here. We can go into a situation where we have a chest lock on our partner, where we go over our partner's arms like so. Instead of having control of one of my partner's arms in the head, we go over both of our partner's arms from here, and we lock our hands like so. So now my partner goes to move around and grab legs like so. It's a pretty easy thing to go in and lock a chest lock. If my partner were to shoot a double leg, for example, and fall, from here we can go in and we can start using this to gain positional advantage, where we take our partner over to our geishi, and we can start going in and coming up on top of our partner. So we can use chest locks from a front head as well. We can go over our partner's arms, and just as with the front head, we can go locked or unlocked. We can unlock our hands, and we can go double triceps like so. So now from here, my partner goes to move around, I can control my partner. When she goes to peek out in either direction, she goes to sit through. It's difficult because I have short elbows. Okay? If I have a chest lock, I have control with locked hands, so when my partner's greasy, it's harder for her to escape, but now peek outs become easier, okay, because I don't have, I'm more invested, and my arms are more extended from here. But when I have short elbows, now it's harder for me to actually control her because my hands aren't locked. But when she goes to peek out from here, it's a very difficult thing to do. Okay, so we have chest lock, where we lock our hands, and we have double triceps, where we have short and pinched elbows like so. Okay, and we can move into situations. This is pretty uncommon, but in situations where we go two hands under our partner's arms like so, we have double underhooks. So now when she has to access either one of my legs, it's a very difficult thing, and we can control a partner from here. I believe in ADCC, it's actually illegal to lock our hands like this, because you have control of both of your partner's shoulders, and the head's controlled. So they count this as like a spine lock kind of position here. So I'm pretty sure you cannot lock, or if you can lock, you definitely can't sit to this position if you're under ADCC rules. So just keep that in mind. But those are the main hand positions we're going to be dealing with. Defensively, we have someone in front of us who has us in a front headlock and is looking to either control us, submit us, or go behind us. So we have to address all those hand positions accordingly and recognize which ones we're dealing with, whether or not there's a strangle danger, whether or not there's a submission danger, and then act accordingly. All right, let's look at what our opponent's goals are. Okay, by opponent, I mean the top player. All right, so right now I'm gonna beat the top player just so we can run through this. But top man's goals, okay, now these are general goals. They change and they get more specific as you get more in depth into the position. But in general, the top player is looking to keep their legs away from the bottom player. Okay, now when you're in a wrestling type situation, this is pretty much always true. Where if she gets to my legs, now she can start to go into some kind of offense from here. So in general, I want to play kind of game where my legs are out and away from my partners, like so. I have weight on my partner, and I can look to keep a chest to back contact and keep my partner controlled with my legs away from my partner. Now, this will change when you add submissions in. So in general, I'm looking to keep my legs away, but not always. If I want my partner, she has defensive hands in place, we're playing like so. If I want my partner to start coming in and shooting for my legs, I can put my legs in various positions, which will allow my partner to actually access my legs. So I bring my legs in, I start playing on my knees here. Now she feels confident enough to take her two hands off and switch to a double maybe, for example. Or now she goes to drive me down, but her defensive hands come off, and now we can start falling into guillotines or other various submissions. Or she goes in, she locks into my leg, with a single leg maybe. Maybe I bring one leg close. And now from here, this gives me the opportunity to go through and lock Kimura and start going into submissions and counters with Kimura. So in general, the top player is looking to keep their legs away from their partner, but not always. I can bait my legs coming towards my partner and create threats of submissions. Okay, that's the first one. Number two is I'm looking to keep a chest to back connection like so, and my partner's head down. Anytime my partner's head can rise, I start running into problems. So for example, if my partner peeks out, either side, and the head starts to rise, now I start to run into some major problems from here. If from here, my partner locks a double leg, and from here, the head starts to rise, I start to run into major problems from here. So I'm looking to keep a chest to back connection, like so, to put weight on my partner. And I'm looking to keep my partner's head down. So anytime she goes to raise the head, I'm always looking to go in and keep the head down. She locks into my legs, for example, and she goes to bring that head up. I'm always looking to keep my partner's head down and put it back between my two elbows and keep the head down and a strong chest to back contact. Okay, so in general, keep my legs away from my partner, keep my chest to my partner's back, keep my partner's head down. Obviously, because we're doing jiu-jitsu, we're looking for submissions. So if we're on offense, we're looking to go into various submissions, where from here we can feed through, we can switch hands, we can feed through, we can break our partner down, we can go into Darces, we can hit various submissions from this position here. Okay, if my partner goes in and she locks onto my legs, there are various submissions that we can do from this front headlock position that you don't have access to in wrestling. Okay, so looking to get into submissions. And finally, looking to use the threat of submissions or just positional advances towards the back to go behind your partner. Okay, whether it be I go in, I switch to a drag, I go behind my partner. Whether it be I use the threat of submission, she's fighting the hands, we go in, we start going behind our partner. So anytime that we can get from a situation where we're in front of our partner to behind our partner will be great for us. Okay, and in wrestling, it's the same idea. All right, anytime we can get behind our partner, we can score and start to look to go in and pin our partner. She has no access to my legs. In our sport, we can go in and look to submit our partner. Okay, so the offensive player, the top man, your opponent in this situation, is looking to keep the legs away from you in general, looking to stay chest to back and keep your head down, looking to hit submissions, or looking to use the threat of submission to go behind and start to attack your back and put hooks in from turtle position or score any kind of other advances from there. Okay, so those are opponent's goals, the top player from a front headlock position. All right, so now let's take a look at what our goals are as bottom defensive player. Okay, first and foremost, we have to defend submissions. Okay, we can't end up in a situation from wherever we may enter in a front headlock. My partner shoots in a guillotine, she locks it up, she sits down, and now I tap and the match is over. Okay, so the first thing we have to do is figure out, okay, where are my partner's hands placed and how do I defend submissions from here? Okay, once we can accomplish that, then we have to stop our partner from going behind us, okay, because ultimately she's using the front headlock to either submit us, or if she can't submit us, go behind. So we have to stop submissions first, stop go behind second, and those are our initial two goals. All right, we don't want to have someone snap us to a front head or end up in a front head and either immediately submit us and the match is over, or use the threat of a submission to immediately go behind us. Okay, if at any point we can access our partner's legs without the threat of a submission being there, that's good for us. Okay, so if we can at any point access one of our partner's legs, where now I feel like I'm not going to get submitted. I can't just go towards my partner's legs and a guillotine comes in and now I'm going to get submitted from here. This is no good. Okay, but if at any point I can access my partner's legs, where when she goes to guillotine me now, there's no guillotine available, and from here we can come in and we can access our partner's legs and either one, look to go in and use it as counter offense in a jiu-jitsu fashion, or two, look to come in and go in and use it as a positional advance to switch positions and go into attacks on our partner. That's good for us. So anytime we can access our partner's legs in any way, assuming there's no threat of a submission, this is going to be good for us. Okay, so accessing our partner's legs, coming in, going, getting to the waist, getting to the legs, getting to the head. This can be good for us, okay? So, defending submissions first, defending go behind second. Once we can do that, we're looking to access a leg. If we can access the leg, then we can reverse the position and go into offense. If we can expose our back to the floor, we're safe from the front headlock. Okay, now, this may, depending on what rule set you're competing in, may get you scored on. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But in terms of good jiu-jitsu, there's nothing good that comes from a front head if we can't take our partner down, if we can't access the legs, and we're pending them going behind us. So anytime we can expose our back to the floor, for example, my partner's in a situation here, if I can expose my back to the floor and sit to a half guard from here, now I'm in much better shape than I just was, being purely defensive and my partner's body weight on me in a bottom front headlock, okay? So this is something that you can't do in wrestling that you can do in jiu-jitsu, which is good, and we can go into escapes, whether it be escaping just sitting to guard, falling to our back, ending up in an ashigarami, whatever the case is, exposing our back to the floor, and escaping the front headlock. This is a great option here, and that we don't have in wrestling. And finally, we have a goal of facing our partner. Now this can mean one of a few things, okay? We can face our partner by simply coming through and sitting to half guard. Or now, if not, there's no chest to back contact anymore, I'm physically looking at my partner, I'm facing my partner. We can come in and we can strip grips. And I can just sit to guard and I can face my partner. So we can do this seated, or if we start building and she comes up with me, we can come through, we can use standing 4-point escapes to start going through, clearing elbows. Now we're both standing, she squares, and now I'm facing my partner and I'm out of the front headlock. Okay, we're back to neutral now. Okay, so first and foremost, defend submissions. After we know that we're not going to get submitted, defend go behinds, because your partner's playing a dilemma game of threatening a submission, either getting the submission or using the threat of a submission to hit a go behind. Okay, if we can access the legs without there being a threat of submission, we can go back into offense. If we can expose our back to the floor, we can go into either counter offense or at least escape the front head. And if we can face our partner, whether it be grounded or standing, we can escape the front head and go back into at least neutral and hopefully counter offense. Okay, so some very general goals for you guys to work with when you're working defensively from a front headlock. Okay, let's look at your standard front headlock. Control the head, control the arm. Your partner locks the hands on the center line. Let's look at our right away go-to defensive hand position. Okay, it's going to be very similar to your hand position when your partner attacks your back. If my partner's behind me on 2 knees, and she has one under, one over, okay, she has control of my head and my arm. Okay, same as the front headlock. So I'm going to have a primary defensive hand with a thumb inside my partner's wrist like so, and then a secondary defensive hand over my partner's forearm. Okay, the primary hand will stop your partner's hand from coming across completely. The secondary hand will do some of the work, but your partner can eventually walk the hand through, and it's a pretty easy thing if she bats the hand off, especially from front headlock with the second hand. Now it's a pretty easy thing to go in and strip and bring the hand through. So our primary hand, we have a thumb inside, we do most of the work here. And the secondary hand, if the primary hand gets stripped for any reason, will catch over your partner's fingers like so. And then now as she goes to strangle me, I can pull it down, replace the primary hand, and go back in and work defensively. Same thing from a front headlock. If my partner has a front headlock, I have a primary defensive hand in place with a thumb inside, like so. So now my partner's hands are on the center line. If my partner goes to guillotine me from here, there's no guillotine. If my partner goes to lock her hands in, let's say, an Anaconda, and she goes to shoot her hands through, she can't because of the defensive hand. If my partner goes to switch her hands to a Darce, she can't because now I can pull the grip back to center. So this primary hand does a great job of keeping my partner's hands centered on my center line, the line that draws my body in half. So this primary defensive hand with the thumb inside will keep my partner's hand on that center line so she can't drift too far towards one side to create the threat of strangles. And when she goes to strangle me from here, I have defensive hands in place, and from here I'm going to look towards my partner's elbow like so. So I look towards the strangle. What I don't want is to look away from the strangle initially, and now if the primary hand gets stripped, she can expose underneath my chin. If I look towards or away from my partner's elbow, she will always be able to expose the space between my jaw and my collarbone with her wrist, and now she'll be able to slide through and give me problems. So I always look towards my partner's strangle arm. So now I connect my chin and my own shoulder, so even if she strips the primary hand when she goes to strangle me from here, she can't expose the space between my jaw and my collarbone, okay? Whereas here, she can expose that space and give me problems. So I always have a primary hand in, lock up. I look towards my partner's strangle arm, and now I have a secondary hand in like so. So if at any point she strips my primary hand, my secondary hand reaches up and catches over my partner's thumb line. So now when she goes to strangle me, I pull it down, I replace the primary hand, and then we're back in business and we're ready to go. Okay? So if you're being very conservative from here, primary hand in place, secondary hand in place, and we're in like so. We're dealing with a guillotine expert or specialist from here, or Gatame specialist, you have to be careful. So she has her legs either out and away, like so, or towards me, baiting me to go in, and now as I go in, I get strangled. So we're being very conservative here, looking what our partner is going to do. Primary hand in place, secondary hand in place. We look towards our partner's strangle arm, and now when she goes to strangle me in either direction, and punch her hands to one side to go either Anaconda, Darce, or Guillotine, I can keep her hands centered on my center line, and the threat of strangle now is taken away. If she uses her hand to strip my primary hand, my secondary hand comes up, I pull everything back down, I replace, and then we go back in and we play right from here. Okay? My partner's gonna have locked hands in any configuration. I'm gonna have primary defensive hand, secondary defensive hand, and a good defensive posture with my jaw to defend the initial strangle. Okay, so this is the second your partner traps the head in the arm, this is what you should be looking for, whether it's with a chin strap, whether it's with locked hands. If your partner has control of your head and arm, we have to keep the hands centered on the center line and not drift too far to either side. Okay, so now we're going to look at the earliest and most conservative way. Again, I'm going to do a full escape instructional on strangles and go through all the strangles you can possibly imagine, but this is part of front headlock. We're going to look at very early and the most conservative ways to defend both the guillotine and the seated Gatame. Okay, now, you may be asking yourself, what is a seated Gatame? Right? Most people call it an arm and guillotine, but it's not an arm and guillotine. It's a seated Gatame. The seated Gatame is when my partner's arm drifts across the body and I lock my hands with a palm-to-palm grip, like so, and now we sit into what looks like a guillotine, but it's actually a seated Gatame. Why is it a Gatame versus a guillotine? Any Gatame uses the shoulder as part of the strangle. Okay? With a guillotine, with any guillotine you can look at, whether it's arm in, whether it's low elbow, whether it's high elbow, whether it's a power guillotine, whether it's figure four guillotine, none of the guillotines that you see use your partner's shoulder as part of the actual strangle. Every Gatame you see, whether it's a Darce, whether it's an Anaconda, whether it's a mounted Gatame, whether it's a seated Gatame, every Gatame involves the shoulder in the strangle. That's why this is not a guillotine, an arm and guillotine. It's a seated Gatame. Okay, it looks like a guillotine, but it's not. It's a Gatame because of the fact that the shoulder is involved in the strangle. Okay. Nonetheless, the defense remains pretty much the same whether we have guillotines or seated Gatame. The second I feel my partner lock any kind of guillotine or any kind of seated Gatame, I just roll through. And the best example that you can see of this is my actually recent match with Philip Rowe at Who's Number One. He actually locked the seat to Gatame, and I just pushed the knee by, rolled through, put my hands on his hips, and then ended up, I think, in some kind of like, I think I actually passed him off of it or something, but I'm not sure. But at least you can escape from here, and you can actually create a lot of offense off of this. So let's go into guillotines first, for example. Let's say my partner locks an arm in guillotine. So we mess up, we lose the hand position. My partner locks an arm in guillotine, and she goes to sit. Okay. The second I see this, my partner's looking to, at the very least, throw her bottom leg across my body and throw her top leg over my body and create some kind of connection at the hips. Okay. So now from here, she can crunch my chin to my chest, and she can start strangling me. So I want to create a disconnect at the hips. So the second I see this, I'm immediately going to take a post to my partner's knee, and I'm going to fall over to my hip, and my right hand is going to post to my partner's hip. Like so. So now, as she goes to follow me, I just shoot this leg through, and she goes to follow through. We just roll to bottom position. And now from here, there's no threat of a guillotine anymore. And now from here, we can go in, we can fight our partner's hands. Usually what's going to happen is she's going to roll through on the other side. As she does that, we reset our hands, and we're back into a situation where we're back on the defensive, and there's no more submission danger. Okay? So the second I see my partner go to lock an arm in guillotine, for example, we post the hand on the hip. If we lose the beat in the hip and she pulls the arm by, I go to the knee first. Now, as I lean, right now I can't expose my partner's hip. As I lean, I can always expose my partner's hip. When she goes to strangle me now, I roll through, and then there's various escapes that we can do from there. The same remains with a high elbow guillotine. She goes high elbow, she goes low elbow. Doesn't make a difference. The second she goes, we just roll to our side, and we look to move our head back to center line. The whole thing we're trying to accomplish is to get our head from the hip to the center line. If I can do that, I'm out. So she goes to sit. Watch my head. The second I go to roll, she goes to follow. My head comes to center. Now the head's free. Same remains with the seated Gatame. She goes to sit. This time I can't access my partner's hip. This is why this is so tight. But from here I have to focus on the legs. So now, as I'm going to post to my partner's hip, it's impossible. I post on the knee. She throws the leg over. I just walk away from my partner's hips. And now I create space, so as she gets to follow me, try to throw your leg over. As she gets to follow me, I put two hands on my partner's hips, and we can take our partner up and over and away. So I'm looking to place two hands on my partner's hips to create a disconnect between our two hips and center my head back to my partner's center line. This remains the same with every seated Kata Gatame and every high elbow guillotine, low elbow guillotine, arm and guillotine, any guillotine you can think of. I'm trying to post my partner's hips to create a disconnect in the legs, disconnect in the hips. I'm trying to recenter my head back on my partner's center line. This is when you're doing a rolling escape. There's plenty of other escapes. Again, I could spend hours just teaching guillotine escapes, but when you're doing very conservative rolling escapes where you capitulate to a side and use a rolling escape, disconnect the hips, recenter the head, and this will get you out of most guillotines, okay, and most seated Kagatames. If I can do this, we're going to be out. So every time my partner goes to lock any kind of guillotine, we're in the front head, I lose the battle, she goes to lock any kind of guillotine, we post my partner's hip, as she goes to really try to finish, if I stay here and just stack my partner, I'm going to get finished. So the second I see this, go ahead. And we can recenter the head, we can post on the hips, and we can escape. Okay, so I want to touch on that. So if you do get beat, your primary hand gets beat, your partner locks the guillotine. Again, I spent hours on this. I'm going to, but very conservative, very early escapes to seated Kagatames and guillotines, any kind of guillotine you can think of. We post the hand on the hip, if we can. We post the hand on the knee, and we fall down to a hip, looking to disconnect our hips from our partners and looking to recenter our head somewhere in the roll through. And if we can't do that, if we can't recenter the head completely, looking to at least put primary hand back in place to control my partner's wrist, and then eventually wiggle the head out. Okay, again, there's plenty of other options we have from here. If our partner locks a closed guard, it's a completely different thing. But if your partner initially locks a strangle, just rolling through, falling to a hip, escaping the initial lock, and then working defensively from there. Okay, so just touching on that, kind of segue into the strangle escapes that we're going to do. And the strangle escapes, for those of you wondering, is going to entail every strangle that I can think of, as far as escaping triangles, kagatames, guillotines, any strangle you can think of, we're going to touch on it. So I just want to kind of touch on that just a little bit so you guys know, if from front head, someone locks an initial guillotine, just fall to a hip, disconnect the hips by posting one or two hands on the hips, and then as you roll through, recenter the head, and you're out. All right, so now we looked at guillotines and seated kagatame. Let's look at a situation where a partner feeds an arm through and actually locks kagatame. Now we're going to look at drags and stuff off of that, escapes when our partner does go to feed into it. But let's say right away we end up at a front head, she shoots the hand through. What can we do to defend? Okay, so we're going to be in a front headlock. She has her hands locked, and from here she shoots a hand all the way through, and she goes in to lock the kagatame. Once she gets the kagatame locked, what I'm looking to do from this position is I'm looking to take a thumb post inside my partner's bicep like so. What this does is it alleviates the pressure and disrupts the connection between my partner's bicep and the left side of my neck. So when she goes to strangle from here, it's a difficult thing, and it's harder for her to close her elbow and actually push my elbow across in this direction. So we put a thumb post in like so, and we tuck our jaw inside of our own thumb. So now when she goes to strangle from here, it's a difficult thing. Not impossible, but difficult. Okay? Now, what we're going to look to do is just kip and pump our right elbow to separate our partner's fingertips from the bicep. Again, this is very conservative. We're not going to dive deep into this, but this is the initial conservative approach. As she goes to lock up, we just take our right elbow and just retract it in small kipping motions. We separate our partner's elbow like so. Now the danger from here is that as your elbow comes back, you expose yourself to a high elbow guillotine. Okay? Because right now, go back, if my elbow is in this position, you see my shoulder and my chin are connected on this side. So my partner goes to shoot into a high elbow, the grip actually gets disrupted by the fact that my elbow or my shoulder and my chin are connected. But when my elbow retracts, I open up space now for that arm to shoot through. So be ready to do a couple of things. I put my hand in defensively. From here, when she goes to strangle me, it's a difficult thing. Now, I kip 1, 2, 3. I separate my partner's elbow. The second I see my partner's hands become separated, I take my secondary hand and I track my partner's strangle hand. When she goes to pump that hand up there and put the high elbow in place, I pull that hand down. I replace my primary hand. My secondary hand comes on. She will either lock her hands or change grips, and now we're ready to play back defensively once again. So she feeds her hands through. She locks up. From here, we go in, we put a defensive hand in place. She goes to strangle me. It's a difficult thing. Now we go 1, 2, 3. Okay, and this, again, this is as your partner's locking, not when she has like a fully locked strangle in place. It's much harder to do. We'll cover that later in a different series. When my partner's initially locking and setting everything in place, we just bring the elbow down to our hips and we track our partner's elbow. I can't just pull my elbow randomly back. I have to connect my elbow to my partner's elbow. So I pull my right elbow down to my hips and I expose my partner's elbow. What this does is my elbow is in this position. If I just pull back, I'm pulling into the short end of the lever. So I pull my elbow down to my hips to track my partner's elbow, and I expose the elbow, and I separate the hands. So as her hands come through, we put a thumb post in place. We hide our jaw like so. I pull the elbow back, and now I go 1, 2, 3.
I separate my partner's hands. Now I'm exposed for a high elbow guillotine. So she goes to shoot it in. Go back. The second her hand goes to shoot through, we catch, we replace, we put the secondary hand back in place, and now we're ready to play. Okay? So our partner actually shoots an anaconda into place. First thing we're going to look to do is put a thumb post in and hide this side of our neck from the strangle, like so. Then I track my partner's elbow, I find it, I go 1, 2, 3, 4. I expose myself for the high elbow on the other side. We come in, we pull that hand down, we replace the primary, replace the secondary, and we're back in business, not getting finished and ready to go in defensively and eventually counter offense. Okay, now let's look at a very conservative and early stage escape for a Darce. So let's say our partner's hands, we looked at our partner's hands feeding through for a guillotine, seated Gatame. Then in one direction for the Anaconda, now let's look at the other direction for a Darce. Okay? This time, my partner is going to take her hands in from an initial front head. And instead of shooting her hands through to this armpit, she's going to shoot her hands through to the opposite shoulder. And now she's going to take a forearm on top of my head and lock her hands like so and look to walk to an angle out on this side like so. The second I see this, before the strangle is actually locked, we're just immediately going to come up to our two hands, and my partner's goal from here is to crunch my chin down to my chest and in towards my right shoulder and force me to a hip. And now she can lock her hands in a triangle. So what I want, the second she locks up, is just build to my hands, and instead of falling over to a hip, I just look in the opposite direction. So she wants to go right shoulder. I'm just going to look slightly left. And now from here, as she goes to start crunching me, I'm just going to look directly between my legs and then do a forward roll and bring my back to the floor. Okay? This will always disrupt your partner's ability to lock a full triangle with her hands. And even if she follows me through, she'll end up in no position to strangle me. Okay? So she locks up a position where she takes her hands through and she actually locks into place. Before she actually locks her hands, I just come up to my two hands like so. What I don't want is my elbow getting pushed across the center line. So I split my elbows by coming up to my two hands. When she goes to knock me down to my hip now, it's difficult. Now, she wants to crunch me in this direction. So I look slightly to my left in the opposite direction. And when I'm ready, I just roll directly over my head, over two shoulders. If she goes to follow me from here, go ahead. It puts her in a strange position now where she has no ability to lock her hands. And if she stays here, she actually ends up in bottom position. Okay? So whenever I see someone come through, even if I go to follow her and she goes to roll through, I kind of end up in a strange position here where now from here it's a pretty easy thing. Even if I went to go lock up, if she turns up to her knees, of course I can still lock it. But from here, she can shoot her arm across my body. Nope. Good. And now from here, turn on top. Nope. And now from here, she's out. Okay? So if at any point I try to go relock, she just quickly shoots the arm across. And now there's no Darce anymore. And we're gone. So the second I see someone lock up, we just come here. She goes to go in. If she unlocks her hands, great. If she doesn't and she tries to follow me, the second I get here, I can't stay in this position. I immediately take my arm up and over, like so. And now from here, when she unlocks her hands, I'm in perfect position now to start going into kimuras, backhanded arms, and going into attacks right from there. It's very conservative again, very basic. Before my partner locks the Darce, as she goes to shoot her hands through, she gets a wedge over the top of my head, just coming up to the hands into a referee position, and then forward rolling to disrupt our partner's ability to actually lock a figure four. Again, tons of different things we can do from here, but this is the most conservative and earliest escape that we can look at.